Okay, so is this the first time that you've worked with Castrol before?
Castrol is a sponsor on my podcast and have been a sponsor for a while, but this is the first time I've actually went out and tried to break a car that they bought.
Well, how did this opportunity to break the car that they bought come about?
Well, I think Castrol was looking for somebody who sort of walked the walk and talked the talk when it came to cars. So they did their due diligence, and they found out that I have a lot of race cars. I have a lot of small displacement cars. I have a lot of turbocharged cars. I use the Castrol EDGE in them because the engines are tweaked and spooled up because of the small displacement and the big horsepower. And they were like, well, this guy races vintage cars. This guy wrenches on cars. So why not just get him? And I don't think they could afford Kimmel. I mean, let's be honest.
Now, you did just mention that you have a lot of race cars. You're known for that and having them on display and all that. When you started buying cars, was it ever for investment purposes, or is it purely because you wanted to have them?
I bought cars I have bought cars for investment purposes in the past. I always would buy cars that I liked. It wasn't like, well, I'm going to buy that car. I hate that car, but I think I can make some money on that car, and then I'm going to flip that car. I've never done that. I've bought cars I've liked, but I've also had an eye toward, well, would they go up in value? And when I bought my first Paul Newman race car, it was his GT1 championship car from 1985. He won that at Road Atlanta in the runoffs in '85. And I did say, is Paul Newman alive? He was alive. I was like, how old is Paul Newman? And he's like, he's 83. And I was like, well, this is his race car. He won a championship in. Like, it's going to be worth something one day. And it wasn't free. It was like $100,000 or maybe more, maybe a little bit more. But it's gone up in value. We've rebuilt everything. I raced it last year at the Rolex Historics. But yeah, there's an element of, is it a cool car? Do you want this car? Do you want to drive this car? And it's also an element of, could you sell it later on when you have to pay for your kid's rehab?
Well, speaking of Paul Newman, I remember seeing in an episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee that Paul Newman had rebuilt several station wagons with race car engines. Do you have anything like that?
Paul Newman dropped V8s into, I think, 3 Volvo wagons. He owned one himself. He gave one to Letterman, and then there's a third one floating around. I don't have any Paul Newman street cars. I tried to buy that wagon off of Wayne Carini, but his partner didn't want to sell it, or vice versa. Either way, long story, no. The Volvo wagon had a little 4-banger engine in it, which you should have put some Castrol EDGE in because it was working hard. Now it got a big 5.0 supercharged Mustang engine, and you could put conventional oil in that.
Right. Now, on the other end of sports, you were known to be a standout football player. How do you think this year's Super Bowl was?
I watched my Rams get vanquished by a team that never gets tired of winning. So personally, I was depressed, but spiritually, I felt good because I had a Super Bowl party in my car museum, and I was amongst all my race cars and all the Paul Newman race cars. So I went and sat in my Porsche 935 that Paul Newman won his class in at Le Mans in 1979, and I wept openly.
Well, this week you had Diamond Dallas Page on your podcast, and earlier you mentioned being somebody that walks the walk, talks the talk. Somebody like him does the same. How do you handle the energy of DDP so well?
Yeah, that guy, he brings it. And although I got to tell you, his voice is getting a little bit rough. I think it's because he's so beaked up. So I actually gave him a shot of Castrol EDGE, and it smoothed it smoothed him out. Now he sounds like Tony Bennett. But I do a podcast every day. I'm lucky enough to talk to like great celebrities and great directors and great war heroes and producers and race car drivers, and it's a blessing and a mitzvah, and I get to do it all in my studio, which is right next to the warehouse with all the race cars.
Well, my favorite of the podcasts that you do are the Take a Knees. Is there anybody that you're still hoping to get on that show that you haven't already gotten?
The Take a Knee is my motivational podcast, and we do a one-on-one thing. And I think coming up, we're going to get director Michael Mann to come on, and I'm a big fan of his, and so I look forward to that. So that's coming up, and that's one that I'm really excited about.
Sure. So looking at everything that you've accomplished on TV, film, etc., is there anything that you haven't yet taken on that you're still hoping to do?
I'm continuing making documentaries and excited to tour and do stand-up and write books and do podcasts. I would like to do Le Mans. I think my bucket list race is get to be part of a team that went to Le Mans, which is the biggest race in the world, and maybe get on a Porsche or Corvette team or something like that, dump a little Castrol EDGE in the crankcase and take off for 24 hours. Of course, you have to stop and get coffee, but other than that, it's a 24-hour race.
Well, any chance of a Road Hard 2 or a similar kind of project to that?
Yeah, Road Hard is an independent rom-com I do a independent comedy every 10 years or so, but they're hard to make. You don't make any money, and it's kind of a tough slog in terms of that. But I do have a lot of documentaries coming out, and you can go to Chassis, CHASSY.com, or you can go to AdamCarolla.com and you can find out any of the documentaries, any of the car documentaries, any of the movies I make, or you can go to Castrol USA YouTube page and watch me drive an Audi R8.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the energy just comes from Castrol.
The energy comes from Castrol. I'm actually wearing a Castrol EDGE patch right over my Nicorette patch I actually have, too. Trying to quit smoking and conventional motor oil.
Sure. So finally, Adam, any last words for the kids?
As far as the kids, go out there, push it to the edge, lead an exhilarating life, and fear nothing except for Kodiak bears, and put that Castrol EDGE in your crankcase.
Thanks a ton. You gave me so much to work with. Keep up the great work, Adam.
Thanks, Darren.
Thanks. Bye now.